Okay, good afternoon and good morning, everyone. We will start in a few minutes, but just to give some housekeeping reminders, may I remind everyone to please keep your microphones on mute at all times unless you are the speaker. Please turn off your camera except for the admin team, unless you are the speaker, of course. And then for any questions, which we shall be taking at the Q&A portion, please type it in the chat box so we can address them during the Q&A. In case some of your questions will not be addressed during the session, you may send it to my colleague Uyandam at businesssweden.se. You should be able to see her email address on the screen. The webinar will be recorded and a copy of the webinar shall be provided to you after the session. We will start in 2 minutes. Good morning and good afternoon. Thank you so much for everyone who took the time to attend today's Building Future Supply Chains webinar, Opportunities in Vietnam and Philippines. I'm Nizelle C, and I'm a consultant here in Business Sweden Manila office, and I will be your host for today. To kick us off with some welcome remarks, may I call on our Trade Commissioner and Market Area Director for Business Sweden and Southeast Asia, Mr. Emil Akander.
Thank you for that, Nizelle, and welcome to all of you attending and listening in and contributing to the speeches and discussions to follow. Earlier this year, I spent about a month in Vietnam and could, with my own eyes during the pandemic, see the rapid development into one of the world's new manufacturing hubs. I spent the early 2000s in China and got a similar view and feel of Vietnam. And not the least, many multinationals diversifying their production and building a great resilience into the supply chains. I think that more and more foreign direct investments are really boosting Vietnam to be one of the world's fastest growing economies, even during the pandemic. I think among all those international players, it's mostly Japanese, South Korean, Taiwanese investors at this point that stands out as the more successful ones in establishing supply chains in Vietnam. But we also have several Swedish players now moving in to establish a local footprint, but also gaining initial sourcing success in Vietnam. Like Vietnam, a country that I also historically, at least pre-pandemic, spent a lot of time in, is in the Philippines. And I think the Philippines has also been growing steadily when it comes to the portfolio of foreign investors. The country boasts a lot of young, talented, English-speaking pool for foreign investors. And the growth has been evident and quite remarkable in the past decades. And I think the country has even positioned themselves to enter very clearly the middle income economy. And services has really been the strong pillar of the Philippines' top export, but also FDI sector. And at Business Sweden, we at least see manufacturing is slowly gaining a ground in the Philippines. And the Philippines hosts many attractive incentives for foreign investors to move into Philippines, and it becomes a very attractive source for both sourcing but also local production. As Nicelle said, this webinar aims to present the Philippines and Vietnam case for building local supply chain, but also to highlight both of those countries' competitiveness as destination for manufacturing towards export-oriented companies. I think there are some questions to discuss today and here, like tactical sourcing, how to move on with more comparable and more same suppliers as you have today, and more ongoing pressing operational issues when dealing with the supply chains. But then hopefully we also have questions to address tomorrow, like how do we apply free trade agreements in this geography? And how do we understand all the extensive incentives, programs, deregulation implemented across Asia Pacific to attract investments? Asia is, as all of you know, a very complex landscape, and when it comes to import tariffs and non-tariff measures, it also greatly varies between different industries. And I think in addition to that, you have potential future political threats, you have controversies that needs to be taken into consideration since trade conflicts, trade war, trade tensions have a high impact on all of your bottom lines. So what about the day after tomorrow? Well, that's hopefully what we're going to talk about today as well, how to build up your own local presence in some of those new dynamic emerging markets. And I think that building a supply chain resilience is a good way to diversify risk and increase cost control in the face of supply shocks caused by not the least the pandemic, but also other imbalances and shortages at the global supply market. And we need to prepare for future transformations of Asia's supply chain, but also at the same time prepare for those long-term shifts, but at the same time manage the short-term disruptions. So with that, welcome to all of you, and really looking forward to listening to the speakers, the best practices, and hear some of the insight from colleagues and participants.
Thank you so much, Emil. And now to start our presentation, may I call on my colleague, Gia Yuson, who is the project manager based in Singapore for Business Sweden in Southeast Asia, to discuss and give an overview of the local supply chains for Philippines and Vietnam. Gia?
Thanks, Giselle. Friends, colleagues, good morning and good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today to discuss about, of course, local supply chains in both the Philippines and Vietnam. So what Business Sweden and, of course, our friends from OSM and HESTRA will do today is share some insights from our end of how it is now in terms of looking at the factors and opportunities in both these markets, and of course in Southeast Asia and Asia Pacific in general. So with that, just a trivia, and then I shared this to my colleagues also quite recently. Would you know that executives at the S&P 500 companies have uttered the phrase supply chain this year by a whopping 3,000 times on investor calls? And just to show, I guess this just shows how important this topic is now. And of course, as Emil has mentioned, due to the pandemic, but I guess overall, because of other structural changes that has been happening for a period of time. And picking up
this negative test result, we must send to the boss for approval. Then we can go into.
All right. Picking up where we left off a year back, we started, Business Sweden has started talking about supply chain developments and resiliency. We know that COVID has pushed a lot of innovations and changes within the supply chain arena, but there have been more underlying structural trends, as I mentioned, that have resulted in more interdependent global value chains, such as globalization, that has been ongoing since the 1970s. With that, the development of FTAs, global economies, improved accessibility, infrastructure, and logistics has enabled the shift towards today's global economy. I mean, all in all, what we see is that Southeast Asia will be a beneficiary of the realignment of global and regional supply chains, both due to long-term structural factors as well as short-term. Specifically, and just as an example, experts have been seeing a good deal of firms based in China exploring secondary manufacturing locations and sourcing options in markets such as Vietnam, Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, and even the Philippines, mainly to diversify risk and exposure. And more on what's driving the shift to speak to Southeast Asia for supply chain development is that, of course, we know the drivers here: rising economic growth, especially looking on a more longer-term horizon. The fundamentals in these markets are still relatively there. Proximity to China, which is the second largest consumer market in the world, as well as relatively competitive costs in select markets. Of course, as you know, Southeast Asia does have its challenges. Just keeping it quite high level here, the three major challenges that we see are, when it comes, of course, to supply chain developments, are comparatively lower productivity, shortage of specialized supply chain skills, and high levels of red tape, which all points out to lack of maturity of supply chain developments in certain emerging markets in Southeast Asia. Nonetheless, I mean, there are drivers, and then of course, one big driver that we can add as well is the potential impact of RCEP, or the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, which is an FTA I think most of you are already aware of, signed last year between the ASEAN members, Australia, China, Japan, New Zealand, and South Korea. When we took a look at the salient points of the RCEP, the general view among some of you who I think we have interviewed, and of course foreign companies in general who are present both in Southeast Asia and other markets in Asia Pacific, is that RCEP should benefit supply chain operations and of course overall demand for the market due to potentially lowered costs and access to new markets within the region. So with that, I mean, there are drivers and challenges, and then zeroing in now on Vietnam and the Philippines. So both markets have been, I think, getting to be popular destinations for intra and interregional expansion. So we're just showing here some high-level figures of both markets. Again, cost-wise, inflation has been relatively at pace within the last 5 years. Of course, generally good demographics on both markets. And then FDI flows, as Emil has mentioned earlier, are rising, at least in the last couple of years. And these are trends that we see continuing on a medium to longer term horizon. But that's on the fundamental growth. But zeroing in on local supply chain developments and mapping. When we took a look at like four factors when people talk about access to global supply chains of markets. So the four factors that we looked at were market access, border administration, infrastructure, and business environment. What we saw in the Philippines is that it is quite challenging, at least as most of you who are already present in the Philippines are thinking of looking into the market. The infrastructure situation, both soft and hard infrastructure, still presents its challenges, as well as the business environment, so to speak. I think it's also fairly known that ease of doing business in this country is quite challenging as well. But there are developments comparatively on market access. The labor market in the Philippines is quite competitive. There's minimum language barrier for those of you who are use English as the major mode of communication and whatnot. But overall, there's still a long ways to go in terms of improving access and streamlining processes in the Philippines. Taking a look at Vietnam, of course, I mean, the complexities in regulations and processes have also hampered, so to speak, participation in global supply chains. But what we can highlight here is promising areas would be the developments in the infrastructure arena, such as, of course, the Vietnamese government has developed a master plan for 2030 transport infrastructure that could be worth as much as $65 billion. So as Emil mentioned, I mean, you go on the ground and then you see all these developments like new airports, new ports, increasing number of free trade zones and whatnot. So, and of course, I think we know that Vietnam is also a popular destination for Chinese-based firms looking to diversify. Nonetheless, I mean, there are improvements in other areas. All right, zeroing in a little bit on sourcing and how it could potentially impact secondary manufacturing activities and presence within these markets. So I start off with the Philippines. When you take a look at this country, it could be argued that supply chain opportunities and maturity, so to speak, is better near the capital of Metro Manila. And then, of course, given that economic activity has been concentrated in the capital for a long period of time. And you can see this. So if I can just... You can see that the number of industries in this market is quite varied, and as well as the number of free trade zones present in this area of the Philippines. Now, the government in the Philippines has been trying to improve accessibility and economic activity in these regions, and we do see gradual increase in free trade zones in the central part of the Philippines, and it's the southern part, which is Mindanao, and corresponding economic activity in Visayas and Mindanao as well. But that would take some time. So when you look at the Philippines, I think Patrick from OSM would be sharing a little bit his experience when OSM had expanded, selecting an area very close to Metro Manila. Moving in a little bit to Vietnam, so quite a similar story, that the major economic activities in Vietnam are situated in the south near Ho Chi Minh. Although when you compare both markets, there's relatively less concentration. But I mean, just to talk a little bit here, the north is a major hub for electronics and automobile, thanks to the proximity of the border to China, while the south has been a hub for larger companies in both size and range. Now, localization rate is relatively improving in Vietnam. Again, of course, the production of components is still relatively underdeveloped, but gradually there are improvements. At present, Vietnam, of course, has limited capacity, but improving capacity in terms of manufacturing high-tech components such as semiconductors. So I move over to Nizel to explain a little bit more on some more quantitative analysis that we did in terms of assessing the viability of building local supply chains. Nizel, please.
Thank you, Gia. Today, we look at 8 industries in Vietnam and Philippines with high potential for sourcing and manufacturing expansion for Swedish companies. Using a quantitative and qualitative model, we were able to evaluate the 8 industries using both economic and non-economic factors to show the different opportunities for each market. For economic factors, we looked at the export orientation, product complexity, and production capacity. Whereas for non-economic, we looked at the labor intensity, trade intervention, and incentive policies. Scores were then identified to be marked from low to high, which you should see on the next slide. Now, for any of those guests who would be interested to discuss this with us, we would be happy to discuss this externally with you. Just send us an email. Next slide, please. So the 8 industries that we will be looking at today are textiles, footwear, furniture, electronics, wood and wood products, packaging, plastics, and chemicals. Of course, this does not exclude other interesting industries, which are also present in the Philippines and Vietnam, such as aerospace, automotive, and construction, which of course we hope to see more in the next couple of years. Looking at textile and footwear, you'll see here that Vietnam ranks with more production and exports. Vietnam also has a number of notable international companies already on the ground. For Philippines, the industry is predominantly SME-driven, with most of the production geared towards the domestic market. However, it is worth noting that the Philippines is working towards a textile roadmap, which hopes to increase the industry's capabilities. In terms of furniture, both the Philippines and Vietnam are definitely interesting destinations with good product complexity scores and export capabilities. At one point, the Philippines was actually considered the Milan of Asia, with high-quality abaca and rattan furniture exports. Similar to furniture, electronics industry is quite stable for both Vietnam and Philippines, with varying capabilities between Philippines semiconductor market and Vietnam's mobile phone market. Both markets scored similarly in labor intensity, having similar semi-automation and assembly capabilities. Next slide. Moving on to the wood, plastic, and packaging industries, here you'll see higher scores for Vietnam in exports, complexities, production capabilities, and labor intensities. Vietnam also boasts of many international players on the ground, whereas for the Philippines, there hasn't been much movement for the wood industry as it still implements a logging ban. Although big producers are present in the Philippines for wood, plastic, and packaging, most of these producers are serving either the domestic markets or their own specific supply chains. Although good to note that the industries for plastic and packaging in the Philippines are already openly discussing applying sustainability considerations for the industries. In terms of chemicals, both Vietnam and Philippines presents good cases for the industry, having more or less similar strengths with higher production output in the Philippines, but higher exports for Vietnam. As an overall summary, based on our analysis right now, Vietnam presents a better score in export readiness and capabilities, which is definitely attractive for export-oriented companies who are looking to expand. However, for the Philippines, there is a lot of potential to host investors who are interested in tapping not just for export-oriented business, but also the domestic market. Several strong SMEs and local private players can also be key to building strong supply chain partnerships. And now going over to the next slide, just to look at the voices from the markets during our interview. So during the course of our interviews, we were also able to get some insights from the players on the ground for both Vietnam and Philippines. As per one of our panel speaker from OSM, they chose the Philippines for its strong trade relations with the US, the English proficiency, and the availability of educated workforce. For Jacobi Carbons, sustainability and security of supply is what really drives their strategy. They face raw material volatility, and the key is diversification of supply regions and manufacturing locations. However, one local company, IMI, has mentioned that there's still a gap in the Philippine supply chains and that the government should continue to invest in building its local supply chain to attract more investors. Moving over to Vietnam, Polarium recommends finding a good partner to help you in your entry strategy. Claes Olson also mentioned that another strength in Vietnam is their familiarity with exporting to the US as well as in other markets. For Hester Gloves, they recommend Vietnam for its favorable business environment. However, it's also good to note that Vietnam still has some limitations in producing semi-final products and capabilities in contributing local content for exports, which presents, of course, many opportunities for Swedish companies in technologies and solutions. And now I hand over back to you, Gia, for the next slides.
Thank you, Nizal. And then again, as Nizal mentioned, I mean, we're quite limited, of course, in the time here. But if anybody's interested to know more about the details of those analysis that we did, and then that is possible to expand it to other industries, please reach out to us after this event. And we would be remiss not to mention COVID today. And I know most, if not all of you, would know the impact of COVID, the impact COVID has had on your own respective production change, not just in Southeast Asia, but I guess globally. But I think the overall learning from this pandemic with regards to supply chain is the importance of building resiliency. It will be challenging, not the least in the very short term, but also within the next coming year or so, as experts have said. But specific to Southeast Asia, again, opportunities should open up due to the expanding FTA networks, which is ongoing even amidst the pandemic, infrastructure upgrades in most emerging markets, as well as the openness to innovation measures in these emerging markets as well. So with that, I mean, so we can leave you, friends and colleagues, with some questions to consider when you're looking at these two markets, Vietnam and the Philippines, to consider within your regional and global supply chains. The first is, I think it's good to ask yourselves, do we have a good understanding of the local supplier landscape? And if not, can we build a good understanding of the local supply landscape? Because there are advantages of buying local in markets of expansion, including lower transport, better supply availability. Then again, the maturity of local suppliers, as we saw, at least in these two markets, might not be to your requirements. So it is also good to consider maybe investing in supplier development. Second question is, are the current or future policies in these markets advantageous for us near term and long term? Because I mean, infrastructures or structures such as eco zones or free trade zones, they do provide fiscal and non-fiscal incentives. Would there be any changes to those incentives in the near or short and long term? And then I think it would be good also to monitor trajectory of government policies that impacts market access, infrastructure, and even ease of doing business. A third question, I guess, is, in all like expansion activities, a third question to ask ourselves is, are we willing to invest for the long term, especially in these markets in Southeast Asia, Vietnam, and the Philippines? It will not be easy. I think, as most of you know, these are still for both fairly developing economies. Local supply chains still have a ways to go in terms of maturity, but there are pockets of opportunities, even in the short term. And of course, consider there are other ways to tap the local supply chains, such as acquisitions, and not the least, investing in building relationships with not just with suppliers, but also with other stakeholders. So with that, I mean, we also leave you with some recommendations, such as companies should conduct a review of internal and external operations to create a scenario analysis in order to map the impact and identify the opportunities. Three things. So again, morally on transforming supply chains for this new reality that we are seeing with COVID and post-COVID. Building resilience and managing disruptions is important, as well as capturing opportunities in a changing environment with COVID and post-COVID. And with that, of course, Mr. Sweden's unique position in the Asia Pacific makes us suited to support you with your ongoing and upcoming supply chain challenges and opportunities. We have feet on the ground, and some areas that we could support you with, such as managing risk and disruptions, transforming your supply chains, and capturing opportunities. So with that, thank you very much. I hand over to our host, Nizelsi.
Thank you so much, Gia. And now moving over to our guest speakers, we start off with the CEO of OSM Group, Mr. Patrick Ogren. So Patrick will talk about OSM's journey in Southeast Asia, particularly his journey in the Philippines. Patrick.
Thank you so much, Nisel, and good afternoon, good morning to everybody. What I wanted to do first is just to give a little bit brief update on OSM as such. I think it's easier to put sort of what we have done in Philippines and what our goals are into context when you know a little bit about the company. So Nisel, why don't we proceed to slide number 2 then. So OSM Group then, so we've been around for slightly less than 20 years, Swedish company by ownership all that time. We are predominantly mainly in engineered soft goods and electronics, and we also have a third leg of that strategy, which is the combination of both. We actually did an acquisition last year when we acquired an electronics ODM company, and that has now also been put into effect when we built the site that we have in Clark in Philippines, to make sure that we have a facility that is future-proof, in which we can execute both engineered soft goods, electronics, and a combination of both. Take the next slide, Anson. So in terms of capabilities, we have quite a large set of capabilities. I won't go them through, but you'll see on this particular slide, you see our capabilities, which are more towards the electronic side of our business. So we do design, mechanical engineering. We have our own test centers for acoustics, etc., antenna designs. a lot of software and EE engineering as well. We also do quite a bit of products for rough environments. So not only do we do beautiful consumer products, but you can also there are customers that uses our capabilities for oil rigs and mining operations as well. So quite a diverse range. Take the next slide then. So what we also have, which is actually the origin of OSM, is the engineered soft goods capabilities. And there we have capabilities ranging anything from developing materials. So we have quite a large experience and capabilities in taking materials from, for instance, Korea, Japan, that has quite unique properties. We are able to localize them, change those properties of that material to ways that it fits product specifications, etc., and localize that supply chain where we have our factories. We have traditional cut and sew technologies. We do forming of EVA, naming one of the materials. We wrap a lot of different fabrics over advanced geometries. And we work quite a bit with heat press bonding and high frequency welding or ultrasonic welding. So these type of capabilities also makes us fairly industry agnostic. So you'll see if you take the next slide. So the type of clients that we work with, so we're an ODM company by business model. That also means that our world is fantastically interesting, but also fantastically challenging. So I think many of you will recognize a lot of these companies here that we are fortunate enough to have as our customers. But that also means that our environment is extremely fragmented. When you deal with 20 plus customers of this caliber, you really have to be very adaptable and flexible to be able to serve all these clients, because they're obviously all unique, not only in terms of products, but also in terms of requirements. Take the next one, then. Okay, so then we come a little bit more to our adventures in Clark and Philippines. And I think we, perhaps as many other companies, we're asking ourselves a lot of different questions. What is the right location? What is the right setup for our business? So we had Business Sweden helping us to go through potential countries in Southeast Asia. To make a long story short, we shortlisted Vietnam and Philippines. But after some further scrutiny on what is right for us, we decided on Philippines. We have a lot of our customers are US based, and from an importation and taxation aspect, that sort of seemed to fit the bill in the best way. The way that our production is also set up in terms of semi-automation and still quite a bit of manual labor, Philippines also ended up being our preferred choice. We ended up in Clark, not too far away from Manila. We were quite happy with that location. We could see that local government and regional government were putting quite a bit of effort in bringing Clark up to represent the vision of their future. We saw Facebook building data centers there. We saw telecom operators investing in 5G networks in Clark, first in the country. So we think we have a pretty positive outlook of that. We managed to find a site which is located around 10 minutes from the airport in Clark. So from a logistic aspect, airways, it's fairly effective. We are very close to Subic and to Manila Port as well, both to facilitate importation and the export that we do. As you can see from this timeline, then it took us, I wouldn't say that it took very long time, but obviously trying to do something like this in the midst of COVID is probably something that I can't recommend to people, but we were fortunate enough to work together with Business Sweden to guide us through a lot of these challenges that we had. We were also able to fairly quickly stabilize or establish a local team, and that was really key to complete this project relatively on time. Also quite accurately on budget, so we were quite fortunate about that. So, okay, next one then, Nicole. If I had one more slide, I can't remember actually. So yes, so just to give you a little bit of a feeling for what we went out for. So we identified a site which was pretty much bare concrete. So we started off with making sure that the site was ready and both for our needs today and also for the needs of tomorrow. So we took sort of a 5-10 year view on the amount of money and the investments that we put into this site to make sure it is ready for our engineered soft goods requirements, our electronic manufacturing requirements, and also the combination of both. So these are some pictures of how it looked sort of in the beginning when we took it over and during the preliminary stages of the renovation that we did. Next slide, Ansel. So just to illustrate a little bit, the initial construction then is quite close to what you saw in the previous slides. Outside of the building was absolutely fine. It was quite a new, or it was actually a brand new development. So outside we didn't have to do much. Then during the mid phase of the construction, we started to prepare ESD epoxy floors, of course, office interior. All the floors needs to be properly equipped when it comes to humidity and temperature controlled. And once it was complete, you could see that it was a much better visualization and representation of what we envision our future manufacturing footprint to be. So. All right, very good. And what does success look like then? So this is actually the picture that our general manager and the team took here pretty much 2.5 weeks ago, when the team down there managed to ship out the first shipment from one of our major US-based clients. So we have grown the facility to roughly 25-30 white colors and 70 to 90 blue colors over the past 4 to 5 months. We have noticed that finding talent in Clark has not been difficult. We've had quite a bit of applications for the jobs that we have been posting, and also in the direct labor area, we have seen actually so much applicants that we more or less had to sort of take the advertisement down because we quickly filled the positions, which is something quite different from what we see in our sites in China, where we go quite long time before we fill key positions. And in certain peak times during the year, it's also very difficult, at least in our industry, to hire enough direct labor. So I think a great shout out to the team that has made this happen in Clark, but also the people in China that helped us to transfer equipment, competence, processes, etc. to our team in Philippines. So, thank you, Nissel.
Thank you so much, Patrick. Great to hear and see your success in the Philippines for OSM Group.
We're also extremely
And
happy.
Now, thank you. And now to share their success story for Vietnam, we would like to call on Mr. Anton Magnuson, who will be talking about Hestra Gloves' journey in Vietnam. Anton?
Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you all and taking the time to present Hestra and our journey that we have made in Vietnam. I also just want to share some brief information about what we do. Maybe many of us know us from the picture here, the gloves. And yes, this is what we do and sell all around the world. We are selling in 40 different countries all around the world, so quite widely spread all around the world here. And we also manufacturers, not only a brand, so that we own our own factories where all the gloves are cut and sewn together, and that's what you can see in the left-hand picture. A glove, all the materials cut into small pieces. The glove you see here, it takes efficient production time, 1 hour 27 minutes to produce, and have around 20 quality control steps, and are 109 different parts that should be put together in a glove that is possible to use in the end. So this is what we do in our supply chain manufacturing that I will tell more about today. Why we have invested in Vietnam. it goes long back. Our company been running for over 80 years, and throughout this timeline we have seen many problems in the world economy and different things that happen that have forced us to make diversification in our supply chain. We currently today operate 2 factories in China, 1 in Hungary, and then we're looking for our newly established factory, a new one. Then we said that we can't invest more in China to put all egg in one basket. We need to look outside. But we said we still want to be in Asia, as we know it's not many advantage. High-skilled people, good salary levels, and also good for us logistic-wise, both between Europe and the US market. And some research that we did together with Business Sweden back in 2016-17, we ended up in Vietnam, in North Vietnam, close to the capital Hanoi, towards the seaside, city called Hai Phong, where we have our factory. This mainly due to the people that we know there was experienced people that knew glove production at this area. So that I would say was the main factor while driving our investment there, that we know that we could start with skilled people right from the beginning. That will really help the factory going quickly and also the efficiency. So that was one of the main points. But then also we've seen Vietnam have been very good with free trade agreement, especially with European Union, that we saw would come hand in hand with us with our export. Then also I think Vietnam also is fairly good developed. Of course, we can't compare it to Europe or Sweden in infrastructure or anything, but still there are a good system in place. So with that in mind, we made a final decision to buy property and start from the beginning to almost same as Patrick and them, fully renovate the whole facility to set the standard of what we think is one of the best glove factories with air conditioned, solar panel, canteen, so the workers get good quality lunch every day. So I think that's really important to be an attractive workplace to get skilled workers to apply for job at our facility. So we've seen it been a very important factor as we started off our factory in as a timeline here. You can see early 2018 was where the factory was open for production. And quite quickly after, exactly at the day of inauguration in September, we also signed the contract for expanding the factory. So we expanded double the size and then also double the amount of workers. We are, as of today, 270 workers. So I think to be an attractive workplace is a key element. And same also as Patrick said, it's very important to have local, good skilled people that can, from the beginning, also even before the beginning, that really can help you in the process, because it's a lot of paperwork, communication, going to different offices to apply for a license, to get the grant to open a entity in these countries. This is not easy, not hard either. We had big help from Business Sweden, but we should know in this country it's not the exact same system as in Sweden, and that's also maybe the advantage for us that not everybody is going there. So that is a key factor to make sure the factory is coming along well. and more to say. I think it's very important to have the local people, as I experienced when I was showing up when we invested in this factory. I was around 28 years. Swedish person. When I was entering into meetings with construction and everything, they saw many times a Western person quite young. This is someone we can try to fool with all the bidding for the construction, but so that we're really important to have good local people that can examine all the contracts, etc. So. But at the end, we are very happy for the factory we have in Haiphong and can really recommend investments further, as it's a good country. We are located in an industrial zone that also help with a lot of the trading, makes it more easier for the import-export handling of the operations. I think that's also something important to keep in mind. Yes, it's more expensive to localize in industrial parks and so on, but it's also helpful and gives also a type of protection also for corruption and so on to be within well-established industrial parks. Yeah, I think that was it for me, and I leave back to Nicelle, and also later on if it's any questions from anyone.
Thank you so much, Anton. And now, before we proceed to Q&A, may I remind everyone that if you do have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat box. We have received several questions during the pre-registration, which we will be tackling also today. And so with that, I hand over to our moderator, Gia Yuson. Gia?
All right, thanks, Nicelle. And thanks, of course, Patrick and Anton for your presentations. Maybe if you guys can just turn on your video cameras again and your mics, then we can have a good discussion before we wrap this webinar up. Thanks, guys. All right, so I mean, before as Giselle mentioned, we did receive a couple of questions from the registration, but before that, we would like to open up the floor, of course. If there's any questions from the audience, please feel free to type it in, and we will take it as we go. Just being mindful of the time, though, I don't see any questions at this time, so maybe we take a question first from the pre-registration question. So, okay, let's take this question from a manufacturing company. I think Patrick, this one you could probably answer this. So, in the last 15 years, we are sourcing many engineering components from India and China. So, we would like to know if, of course, I think to you, Patrick, if such competitive opportunities exist in the Philippines.
Okay. So the first products and customers that we're serving in Philippines are engineered soft goods based, but I think from we also today import certain raw materials from Korea and China. I think so far, set aside the fact that we're having challenges now with shortage of containers and back and forth. I think importation-wise, HS codes, duty codes, etc. I think we've been, well, as we expected, it's been okay, right? So I don't foresee that being any particular problem when it comes to electronic components, regardless of where they're being manufactured. So that should not become an issue. So.
All right, thanks, Patrick. Okay, I see a question from Bunchun. All right, so do you have any difficulty in getting skilled workers and achieving the quality, at least the required for skilled workers? Maybe Anton, you can answer first, and then Patrick, you can answer your experience. Yeah.
I would say no. Been fairly easy to attract skilled workers, both admin workers and of course production workers. We have been fortunate in finding good skilled workers. Then of course we are a small player in this environment, so we only have 270, and the companies around us are sometimes LG, Samsung with 10, 20,000 employees at one location. Then of course it becomes more harder for those type of company. But for us, it's been, I think, in a small company that we are, it's been fairly easy. And as I said, to try to be an attractive workplace and investment from Europe. I think I've heard in many interviews that they really like to work with European companies, as some Korean, I will not say everybody, Korean, Japanese companies has a reputation of being quite tough in their work stations.
Thanks, Anton. Patrick, on your side.
Yeah, and as I said during my presentation, and I think we were pleasantly surprised on the availability of skilled workers, both on the sort of direct labor, blue collar and white collar. On the white collar side, I remember our GM saying several times that he ended up with having shortlisted 3 people, and he could literally pick any one of them because they were all excellent candidates. So I think on that side, relatively easy, happy with what we have found so far. Direct labor, similar situation. Some of our processes does not require a lot of skills, but we also actually had a couple of processes which were quite technical by nature. We were quite worried about how we would manage that. We did although find that there is that particular skill you can find in bag manufacturing, and luckily there are quite a bit of manufacturing around Clark where they have exactly that specific skill set. So far so good, I would say. So pleasantly surprised.
All right. Thank you for that, Patrick. A good number of questions I have on manpower and workforce, but maybe before we take the question from KK and then Horst, to you, Anton and Patrick, just to share with us, how do you usually do the deal with your recruitment? Is it done locally, or do you handle, or, is it outsourced, or do you do it in house? Yeah.
You want to go first, Anton?
Yeah, so no, all our recruitment is done locally. I think that's a key aspect to have local management, even on the higher level. As I experienced myself, I've been a manager for our operation in Hungary. To be a manager where you don't live there, you don't know the culture exactly, you don't know the problem the workers has outside the work, you are not a good manager if you don't can see this. So that's why we have seen it's very important to have local management on all levels to be able to have a good work force, and it's done internally mostly. Then for some key position as financial manager and export, we have done with an agency who helped us for research.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Patrick?
Similar situation for us as well. We currently don't have any expatriates in Clark. There's no immediate plans of having expatriates there either. In terms of recruitment process, we did use the services of Business Sweden to find the general manager and the HR combined finance person that was sort of employee number 1 and employee number 2. After that, those 2 people has also been responsible for the recruitment locally then, and so far that's worked out exactly to our expectations.
Great, thanks, Patrick. Thanks, Anton. Okay, next question from KK. So how do you assess the future workforce challenges in Vietnam? And this is a question to you, Anton.
No, it's of course Vietnam is growing, more and more companies investing there, and we see big automotive electronic industry coming there. So for our work intensive products, it can become problematic in the long run, but I still see positive on it. We don't need to compete on, we can have a higher salary level, we can have more good benefits in that, and also as we are a fairly small employer, I think we can always manage to find good skilled people. But yes, we are looking for expanding factories more into the mainland in Vietnam and maybe also at other parts in Asia too, as now we are at the North Seaport. That's of course a more hot area, so we may be looking to expand with satellite factories more into the mainland to help to support our main hub.
Thank you. All right, next from Horst. So what are your experiences to retain the people on board in Vietnam and the Philippines, and is mobility an issue for you? Yes, maybe Patrick, you can take that first.
Sure. What was that last one? Was it around mobility you said, or what was the last part of that question?
Yeah, Horst, maybe you can elaborate a little bit on mobility of people within the...
Sure.
Hey, thanks, Horst.
Sure. Yeah, so in terms of retention, etc., since we have just started our operations there, we haven't had that much challenges with that as of now. My experience from working in Philippines is that retention is something that you have to be quite cautious with. People do come and go, but a little bit like what Anton said, I think our strategy here is to become a good local attractive employer and try to work sort of against the negative retention rates that way. We have also been able to find most of the people so far quite close to Clark. The few examples that we've had, people have come from Manila and relocated, haven't seemed to be a big problem, at least not initially, right? So.
Great, thanks, Patrick. Sorry, Horst, could we just clarify first what you meant by mobility here?
Yeah, Principal, hello, and thank you for the presentation. I mean, it's interesting to listen to that, and when, like we are now 53 years in the Philippines, it's great to listen to somebody who really started up it a couple of years ago. My question was exactly that, what was answered that from Patrick's side. It's one thing to get the people on board in the Philippines, and I agree. It's from my experience, it's not that difficult to get good people on board. It is maybe a second challenge to remain them on board, and that the mobility percentage or fluctuation is not too high. And that was my question, but I think it was answered already.
Yeah. No, but of course you're absolutely right, and of course we already see sort of early signs on hiring is quite easy, and we've also noticed that perhaps in Philippines people are leaving for, how should I say, very different reasons compared to China, right? You could, in a sort of professional environment, you could call those reasons perhaps a little trivial, but that is clearly what is sort of happening, right?
Great. Thank you.
Can I just say something, Gia, on this topic on workforce and skilled workers and quality and so on? I think it's important, as I said in the opening, about what do we do today or tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. And I think in general, looking at the Swedish industry base and the industry logics, a lot in those two markets would probably happen more towards the end now. So I mean, when we look at Vietnam and the Philippines and we look at foreign direct investments coming in, since both of those markets are export driven, it's important to recognize that the majority of the investments today are going into textile, business services, communications, financial services, basic components, rather than advanced electronics or advanced manufacturing, where typically Swedish industry comes in now. But that being said, it's of course important to recognize that yes, there's a general shift. There's a young, talented workforce in both of those countries, not the least in Vietnam. There's a lot of low labor cost, good qualities, great support from both of the governments now. So things will happen, but the ecosystem is not that developed and not that mature as many of the other ecosystems. And I think what makes sense today in consumer products hopefully will develop and make sense in other types of manufacturing tomorrow now. So the question of quality, of course, depends if it comes from US Hexagon or if it comes from a consumer goods company in that sense. No? So I think that's just important to recognize them. What's the level of quality? Quality is good at the level of the current FDIs and the activities. It's hopefully developing now with Korean, Japanese, Chinese, Taiwanese investments into those countries, and then hopefully go faster than slower in terms of the development. And it means that if we want to be competitive, we need to take action now so we don't lose ground in 5, 10, 15, 20 years or something like that in those markets, but nothing for tomorrow probably.
Thanks. All right, just being mindful of the time here, maybe I can just ask a last question to both Anton and Patrick before we leave. Your final thoughts, right, and perspectives on manufacturing, global manufacturing, and well, your presence in both these markets post-COVID. Where do you see your operations moving forward after COVID has dissipated? Anton, maybe we can take your answer first.
No, I'd say post-COVID, I must say I'm extremely happy, even during and post-COVID, that we own and operate our own factories. That makes our supply chain much stronger compared to many of our competitors, even if we have many problems also in the logistic and everything currently, but we know the problem much earlier than many of our competitors. And I see also still be diverse always when you look on all levels, but especially in manufacturing. So we will look. We will never try to be too big in China and Vietnam or Hungary. We will start looking to new countries also for the next investment and opportunity for our supply chain.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Patrick?
Yeah, so I think fairly similar for us. We have a strategy to be global in everything we do, both in terms of people that we hire, where we manufacture, where we ship, where we distribute, etc. So that's something that we will continue to push forward with. And ultimately, supply chain diversification is also just about managing risks, reducing risk, building resilience and robustness into our supply chain. And given the fact that we're working with so many customers, it is of them that they are asking us to sort of secure that part and helping them out in their supply chain, and that's what we're going to continue to do, right? So, and I think moving forward, I think most companies needs to have sort of a China plus strategy. China is, at least in our aspect, most likely never going to lose its prime spot in our supply chain setup. Not in terms of manufacturing, not in terms of raw material manufacturing, but you cannot put all your eggs in one basket, right? So.
Yep. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patrick. Thank you, Anton, Emil, and Gia. And of course, I would like to thank everyone also who attended this webinar with us. If you have any questions, if you have any concerns, we have a full team in Vietnam, Uyen and Huang, who would be happy to discuss any questions that you have. We also have a team here in the Philippines, Tina and Gia, who would be very happy to discuss any concerns that you have. We will, of course, send you a copy of the webinar. I think either we will upload it or we will send it via WeTransfer, but please expect it from us, not tomorrow, but in a couple of days, since we still have to process it. But thank you so much. I wish you all a great afternoon, a great morning, and a great week. Keep safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.